getting back to you, so you graduated from New Paltz, and then right after you married Saul, right?
And 2 years later,
Okay, go ahead.
the politicians from Mississippi, well, no, they came up earlier, and it was in progress, I think, when we got married, and gave the Onyx Knitting Mills, which was the Petersell family. They were second cousins of Saul, who owned the plant, and there were three of the Petersells of that generation, who owned this plant. In Philadelphia.
Right, so you moved to Philadelphia.
Moved to Philadelphia.
Initially. Were your parents upset?
Oh, my goodness, you'd think we were going to Siberia. My whole family came to Grand Central.
Really?
My aunts and my uncles from all the surrounding areas came, and you'd think to my mother I was going to someplace in Siberia and never be seen again. But it worked out fine. We were on a Pullman, and of course I'd never been on a Pullman before, neither Saul. And it was a nice experience until we got to Moss Point, to Pascagoula.
How did he court you, Saul?
Well, we went on walks. We did a lot of walking. And then...
On the porch?
On the porch. Saul's family had a big house that he bought from the local saloon keeper, which was the biggest house in Nyack at that time for the ordinary people, because up and down in Upper Nyack, all of the very wealthy people had their homes, one of which was Helen Hayes. I can remember as a young girl walking down there and going and watching them build her house.
Oh.
Yes. There were 7 bathrooms, was the thing I remembered, and one was a wooden bathtub. I'll never forget that.
So anyway, you and Saul took walks?
Took a lot of walks, and we courted mainly on the porch of his big house, because it had a big swing. You know, great big, those metal swings that went back and forth. And spent hours.
Would you hold hands?
Oh, sure. We kissed, and we called it necking.
Oh.
You know, necking.
Why?
Where you hugged, they called it necking.
Did you hug for a long time and kiss for a long time?
Well...
Right on the porch? Anybody could have come.
Oh, sometimes they did, but we weren't doing anything that they couldn't see, And they'd come and chat with us when anybody came home at night. It was always at night, generally, because he worked.
Was he handsome?
Very handsome. As a matter of fact, he had a scholarship to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Because he was so handsome?
Because he was so good-looking and spoke so well. He had command of the English language as you have never heard. Nobody believed that he did not go to college. When we came to Mississippi, his best friend was publisher and editor, 2 of them. One was the publisher and one was the editor. Courted him, and were his best friends. And when the publisher heard he didn't go to college, he didn't believe him. And so...
so you must have been pretty beautiful yourself.
Well, I had a great deal of energy.
Still have.
And when I came to Mississippi...
Well, let's not...
Oh, we're skipping a nice part that I forgot. Where was I? Now I forgot.
Oh, you were about to say skipping to something about Mississippi. You're beautiful. You have a lot of energy.
I just had a lot of energy, and I was traumatized with the culture shock I experienced in Mississippi.
Okay, so anyway, I don't want to just skip, in sequence. So you and Saul got married. You moved to Philadelphia.
Yes.
And there was some labor trouble there.
Yes, terrible trouble. And so when the politicians from Mississippi came up and offered them a first in Mississippi, which was to build them a factory 99 years tax-free.
Factory they offered?
In Mississippi, and it was between Moss Point and Pascagoula, and they called it Pass Point, really. And they employed 550 people. And the only help that they got, the only help they could have gotten, was the farm girls who lived on the farm. They had never known of modern plumbing. When they came, they all had outhouses on the farms. They had to teach them how to use modern plumbing.
So now, what was Saul doing exactly in Philadelphia?
Well, he was learning to run the business because that's what they were aiming at.
Wasn't there a Petersell store in...
Oh, sure. It was called Petersell Sports Shop in Nyack, New York. It was called the Petersell Sports Shop.
Okay, that's what his father...
gave to them. He really didn't own it. He gave it to the two boys. And,
Are you enjoying this?
yeah, I'm enjoying remembering because, I can't remember very well.
You're doing wonderfully.
And, anyway, the culture shock was absolutely traumatic. We got there, and there was no place for us to live. There hadn't been a house built.
How did you get there?
By the Pullman train.
Right. So when you got there, there was no house?
No house for us to live in.
Where did you stay?
We stayed, I can't even remember that. Oh, the local banker gave us their guest room to live in until housing could be built, since not a house had been built in 20 years. They built 5 houses for the supervisory people, right in a row. And it was a wonder to all these people to see these new houses being built. And we had a huge backyard with 7 pecan trees.
Wow.
I picked every one of those pecans. It was a grab bag for me.
So you mean to tell me that the government?
No, not the government, but the townspeople.
The townspeople built this house?
Built these houses. Can you imagine what a boon it was to these business people to have 550 people coming to work in this lazy little 4,000 population town?
And so they needed Saul to help.
And they needed the money that factory produced.
Right.
That's it for now.